Welcome to the Mark Attwood Show, Adventures in a Cosmic Suit. Now, if you have followed my work for any amount of time, you should be aware of the fact that one of the reasons I do this is because I've been aware of child abuse for quite a very long time. I was abused myself, and a lot of my family were abused. And when I really deeply understood how endemic this is across the board and how it goes to the very top of society and how it empowers people that have no right to do what they do to children, I couldn't not do this job. And I think don't switch off. I know it's a tough subject. It is a tough subject, but I strongly believe that we as a species have to face the reality of this. Because if we don't, how can we ever get through it? How can we ever get to the point where it's impossible for it to happen again? If you haven't seen my poem, We See You, go and find it, watch it, because that's what this is really all about. So I've interviewed a number of survivors over the time that I've been running this channel, because I think it's really important that we hear these stories. And I've got another one with me today. So it's my pleasure to introduce Gloria Masters from New Zealand. Hello, Gloria.
Hello. Hey, great to be on the show, Mark.
Well, thank you very much for joining me. Your story is hard and harrowing to read about, because I've read about it. But I'm going to let you tell it in your own words.
Sure. So I was born into child sex slavery. This was at the hands of my father predominantly. So from the time I was born up until the age of 16, I was continuously and repetitively used as a sex slave, trafficked out to gangs, to a club, which is a global entity. I suffered many, many forms of vitriolic and cruel abuse. I feel very grateful to be alive and to have made it through those years. I had no one to support me or listen to me or try to help me. My father's mother and one of his sisters, my favourite auntie actually, until I realised what was happening, were designated to train me to be the best child prostitute I could be. Now, I know for viewers out there, they find that abhorrent, but I'm speaking truth, and I don't know of another name to call it. I made so much money for my father that he was able to purchase one of only 4 Pontiacs into New Zealand in 1968. And he made a great deal of money out of me. I ended up in working out of the red light district in Auckland from the age of 11 to 16. I was squirreled away into a room on the top floor in this nightclub, and their men would come and abuse me and pay a lot of money to have that. I was going to say privilege, but we can't use a word like that. Out of that same nightclub, and for many years prior to that, well over 100 movies were made, pornographic movies, of which I was the main star. So other children became involved, and yes, I was drugged quite heavily, periodically, because no one wanted to pay money for a child that was too traumatised to perform. So that's it in a nutshell. and I'm not crazy, and I'm so grateful I made it through. I'm so grateful.
How do you make it through something like that?
Well, it's an interesting phenomena because it's so unusual. But I had little angels around me. So when I was being abused or beaten or psychologically tortured for those years, I actually found little angels would be playing nearby, and I would kind of connect in with them. So that was one way. I just felt their love and light around me. I was also able, I was born an optimist. I still am, believe it or not. Yeah. So I was able to make it through with several ways. One was having that kind of spiritual belief beyond me, just because of what I saw as I went through the worst of it. Another was I loved to run and I loved to play sports. So doing that took me out of myself and those endorphins were released. I leant heavily on my friends. They didn't know it, of course, at the time. School was my only safe place, Mark. So I acted out a lot at school. The nuns could not remove me from school because I would hide. they would eventually find me and have me leave the school grounds, but I hid very well because it was safe and it just helped me, keep sane, I think.
As a father, I find it almost unbelievable that a father could do that to any child.
Yeah.
And I say almost just because from everything that I've seen and people I've spoken to, I know that this happens. But how do you reconcile being a child and trusting your parents and your family? And that's the thing that I think that's possibly that's the hardest. Isn't that the hardest part?
Yeah. So look, you're absolutely right, because when you're a small child, your parents are God. They have all the power, and they have the total control over everything. So I think after decades of therapy and working it all through, as you can appreciate, it's taken most of my life to heal and recover enough to give back. But what I figured out in the end was he didn't see me as his child, his precious, beautiful youngest child. He saw me as an object. So we're talking a psychopath, complex narcissist, borderline, everything you can think of. He saw me as an object. And when you see a person or a child as an object, they don't evoke feeling in you. Just to give you an example, in my entire 16 years, he never once spoke to me about anything other than the sexual activity I could provide, and how to keep me as thin as possible, because it was more appealing for the pedophiles and they would pay more. So I wasn't seen as a child of his that he loved. I was an object, and you don't waste money, time, attention, or love on an object.
The other aspects of this that I think people struggle with is the women,
Yes.
your mother, your auntie,
Yeah.
that, because a lot of people just assume that paedophilia is just men.
Yeah.
But the women, how did he have? Did he have control over your mother and your auntie? How do you think that?
No, it was his mother. His mother. That's what I mean. I think it was intergenerational. His mother was the one that trained me, and one of his sisters. So yes, let's blow the lid off this myth once and for all. Women do abuse. There are women pedophiles out there. There's quite a few male survivors that talk about having experienced abuse at the hands of women. So I think we have to stop just imagining it's only men. Aside from that, women can often be the gatekeepers around these pedophiles and these pedophile rings. So there's often, if I say to you, look, there's up to 1 in 3 of us adults out across the world who have experienced some form of child sexual abuse, there is at least another 1 in 3 who had knowledge of it. And I'm not just talking pedophiles. So mothers and women can often be complicit, Mark, and it's sad, but I think it's time for responsibility to be taken, and for our wonderful male survivors out there to feel we hear you, we believe you, and we support you. It's bigger than we think. Yeah.
And you were born into a Catholic family, and
yes.
Your family took you to mass every Sunday.
Absolutely. So you will know or have heard, I'm sure, that the Catholic Church heavily infiltrated by Freemasons. There's quite a complicit understanding or kind of channeling of things that go on. I would see Freemason handshakes at that church on Sundays. So this is not news, unfortunately, and it is global. And as we see more and more in this country, as well as yours, Catholic churches and people who were in care and abused in care through brothers, the Catholic brothers and nuns. Now, the lid's coming off a lot of this stuff.
I've long known that the Catholic Church is actually satanic, and
yes.
This is why I hated going into any Catholic church, even a Church of England church. The only time I enjoyed going into church was with my great grandfather, because he was a really good man, and he believed in God, and God was flowing through him. He was a beautiful soul, so I always felt safe with him. But I would go out with girls who were Catholics, and I'd go into the churches, and I'd be like, well, this is so weird. The whole energy of it freaked me out. And when you understand that the rituals and the fish hats and the eating the body of Christ is literal, it's not, under their own law, it makes you realize that they have used satanic energy under the cover of Christ. And this to me helped me understand how such evil people could go into such a place that was supposedly so good and pretend to be doing good things, but actually what they were doing was inviting demonic energy into them. And I'm not using that as an excuse for them. I'm just, I think that's my understanding of how, once I understood that, it started to become clearer how they could pull this off. And I remember my dad was abused by a preacher. He was a lay preacher at the Church of England church, and he ended up setting up a church in my village, which became known as the Jesus Fellowship and then the Jesus Army. And that church was rife with paedophilia, because the guy that set it up was a paedophile.
Yes.
Guy called Noel Stanton, for anybody watching. And my dad told me a version of events throughout my childhood. He died when I was 17, but I did get his version of events. When I found out later that he was not telling me the truth about it, because he didn't want his son to know how bad it was. And when I found out, I said to his mother, my grandmother, "What did you know about this?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Why didn't you do anything about it?" And she just looked at me and said she was scared.
Yeah.
Fear in her eyes when she was about 80 when she told me this. And I think people need to understand that one of the ways this has been kept so, because it's mind-boggling when you think about how this has been kept so quiet for so long. I mean, I live in Ireland, which has been rife with Catholic abuse for centuries. You know, Tuam's not far from me, where they found 800 dismembered baby bodies. You know, and then of course
Goodness.
there's Kevin Arnott's work in Canada with the genocide of indigenous people and the
Yeah.
mass rape and abuse of children, and the Queen and Prince Philip in the woods in 1966 with those 16 children that were never found again. And people just find it so fantastical that they don't want to go there. And this is the thing that I find interesting about how people they can't believe, if they're a good person, they can't believe that anybody could do this. And I think that's the thing I've been going on about personally in my own life to as many people as possible, is we have to face this. We have to understand that this has actually happened, which is why when I meet someone like you, I am in awe of your bravery and your perseverance and your strength. Your spiritual strength is off the charts. And I wonder if this ties in with the time that we're in, and that, do you think there's an element of, or do you think there's any credence in the idea that you chose this path so that you could come up to this time and be a pillar of strength for other victims, so that we can finally flush this out of our society?
Yeah, absolutely. Most people who would suffer anything like this, unfortunately, don't tend to live long lives
Yeah.
through their own choice, or they, can end up being addicted to pretty serious drugs and then not taken seriously or labelled accordingly. But I think you're right. I think I personally feel I chose this life. What was I thinking?
No.
What was I thinking? But you know what? Let's use the light. Light will always overcome the dark. And my big purpose in life, I feel, is to help other people by shining light on this through love and humility. And there's a few things I'm doing at the moment that support that. But I just want to go back a little bit to a point you raised. My concern and the big challenge I think we have, Mark, is trying to get this taken notice of when we have wonderful, good people out in the world who just feel uncomfortable listening to a story like this. So what happens then is they want you to shut up because it makes them uncomfortable. But my response is always, actually, by speaking out, might be your child or grandchild I save. So I will never stop speaking out. Thank God. And look, we need to. But what I struggle with, I run a YouTube channel called Handing the Shame Back. Don't you love it?
Yeah.
And it's for, I interview survivors, other survivors out there. And I also post interviews like the one you're doing with me. Why? Because if even one survivor watches this and feels less alone, or feels that they can even tell one person, Mark, what happened to them, that touches my heart. That's why I'm doing this. But we have to find a way for the conversation to be normalised, so that there's not such a big stigma, because what we're doing without realising it, when we don't speak because of discomfort or embarrassment or awkwardness, the pedophiles get another pass to continue.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to have, you remember last year there was this, and it was the sign for help me. I'm in danger. It was domestic violence. It went all across Facebook, and it was when people were in lockdown, they couldn't escape. I'd love to have some sort of sign that people could give to say, you know, I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse, help, you know.
Well, they've been extremely clever.
Yeah.
When I realised that Childline in the UK, which was set up by a famous TV presenter in 1980-ish, was really a way of capturing those children so that they wouldn't go any further with their story.
Wow.
That's when I realised how deep this went. And also when I've seen legal cases brought against the Catholic Church and other organizations, I've seen those cases dismantled in a controlled demolition because they have lawyers that ring fence them. And there's ring fences and ring fences and ring fences. And when you look at Jimmy Savile and you look at how protected he was for so long at the highest echelons of society, when you realize Prince Charles sent him a Christmas card saying, "Dear Jimmy, don't fix it for me. Dear Jimmy, this country will never know what you've done for it." And you realize that he was trafficking children through down the country, through down to Portsmouth and then out onto the Channel Islands, where people like Ted Heath would toss these kids over the side of the boat. When you realize how deep that goes, that's what people are afraid of. That's why they don't speak out, because they have this fear. And I remember when I first started talking about this sort of thing publicly, on Facebook initially, about 10 years ago, I was doing a conference and this amazing woman came up to me and held my hand. And she said, "What you're doing is so brave." And I was like, "Well, why is it brave?" I didn't understand why it was brave. I just see an injustice and we have to talk about it. And that's just the way I'm made, I think. But she said, "You know, aren't you afraid that they'll come for you?" And it was interesting when she said that, because it really dawned on me that that goes through the minds of a lot of people. They think they're going to be come for. And my answer is that, so what if they do? So what if they do? Because this is about our souls. This is about us remembering who we really are. And who we really are is not this human being point of attention in 3D. Who we really are is this huge multidimensional soul that has to find the way to truth, because the power of truth is the same as the power of the light. And it cuts through the darkness, and we have to keep shining them, as you've said. If we don't shine the light, what hope is there for our eternal souls? And that's my viewpoint. And it's time for everybody to stand up, face this, and start to do something about it. So before I go into questions about what we're going to do about it, because I love that idea and I think we should definitely do that. You should come up with a thing and I'll help spread it, and we'll get other people.
Cool.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea, because I'm a big fan of using their tools against, and social media. Social media is
love it.
Yeah.
Yay.
Well, that's martial arts. We use their power against them.
Yes.
Which is why, I'm using YouTube and whatever social media I've got left to do what I can. Because it's their platforms. These platforms are owned by the same people. Created and owned by the same people. So there's our opportunity to, use that against them. But before I get into the solutions, before we get into that, I'd like to go back a little bit, because I'm always intrigued by the fact that someone like your father has access to all these other people that think it's a great idea to do this and are in this club. How do you think someone like that, how do these rings form? What's your opinion on that? How do they form? I mean, I know people get initiated into them. I know people are in a stream of abuse, and they, so maybe these things go back hundreds, thousands of years. I don't know. What do you, and also I want to talk about the satanic element, if there is one in your experience.
Oh yeah, there is. Yeah.
Right, okay.
It's all in the book, and people don't like reading the book, but read the book. It's all there, and I haven't even put everything in.
What's the name of your first book?
Oh, On Angel's Wings.
Okay.
My Flight from Trauma to Grace.
Right. You send me the links. I'll put them below this video.
Yep.
And then you can go and get that.
Okay. In my humble opinion,
Mm.
my father got into this because I think his parents were hugely part of it before he was even born, and I think their parents before them. So you're right. I think it does go back hundreds of years, and it's multi-generational. So connections and ties and bonds were formed. I think the Catholic Church was a great recruiting ground. I think people joining the Freemasons back in New Zealand in the early 60s, it was seen as doing good out there. And I think because of the connection between them and the Catholic Church, it just grew and it spread. To be honest, and this is what I truly believe as well, I think within Freemasons there's a very, very strong structure and hierarchy. So I think when you join the Freemasons, you may be a wonderful man, you may be a wonderful dad, and you just want to do good in the community.
Yeah.
So you may not have access to any of this pedophile ring. I think that happens as you progress through the ranks.
I got to say, there's a lot of good Freemasons out there that have no idea about this.
Absolutely, they'd have no idea.
A lot of good people in the Catholic Church. They have no idea because
No
of the
idea.
structure.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I can remember being 6 years old, Mark, in my grandmother's front parlour. It was one of the places I was trafficked out of. And I remember a black car. So I'm 6 years old, okay, tiny, but still had little baby teeth. And these men drove up in this black car, and I peeked out the window, and they were there to obviously rape me and abuse me and pay a lot of money for it. But what struck me was the car had flags on either side of the windows.
Mm-hmm.
And there were what I now know as bodyguards.
Mm-hmm.
So I now know A plus B does equal C. That was someone in our political system. And this goes way beyond what people can imagine. And I know there's people out there who just like me to shut up, but I just don't want to. It's my purpose in life is to expose this. And I believe that the power behind me with these angel wings, it's so powerful that this light can overcome. But we just need a few more of us to grab hold of the torch.
We do. And if you're watching this and you're resonating with this and you've got something to say, please get in touch with Gloria, get in touch with me, get in touch with other people that are not afraid to talk about this, because the time of fear is over.
Yes.
They cannot touch us.
Well, they can try, but we'd have to wonder, wouldn't we? If suddenly you hear Gloria Masters has had an accident or she's no longer with it, you know.
I meant spiritually.
Oh, yeah. No, I've got very, very big power behind what I'm doing spiritually.
I can feel it.
It's very powerful. I'm very grateful. And sometimes people think softness and gentleness is weak.
Mm-hmm.
Just the opposite.
Absolutely.
You've got big angels behind you too as well, Mark. I can see them. So, look, at the end of the day, we have to do what is right. Yeah. We just need more power behind us. We just need more voices, and we really need some strength here, because, you know, I'll do my best from good old Aotearoa. It's quite hard, though, for me to even get survivors to interview, because the shame is the big silencer. So when you think about child sexual abuse, Mark, and you think of your own even, what renders us incapacitated to talk it out is it starts in secrecy. The silence is ensured through the threats made against us, but it's the shame that will keep us quiet, because as a child, we take that on and think it belongs to us. Couple that with no one really wants to hear it, and how clever these groomers and pedophiles are. You stand a child and an adult in front of another adult, I'll give you $1 million because people are always going to believe the adult.
Which is mind-boggling. Anyway, let's be positive because...
So, no, this is good. But what's good is, Pete, we're speaking out. You're prepared to host someone like me on your show. I was blown away when you said yes. But we just got to speak out.
Yeah. When I said let's be positive, I was talking to myself, not because you are being positive just by being
Yes.
here.
Yeah.
It's amazing what you're doing. Have you managed to find peace and love in your own life?
Absolutely. I'm very blessed. I feel, surprisingly, I'm possibly one of the happiest people I know. But
You are?
if people say to me, are you really that happy all the time? Yeah, pretty much. To be honest, after what I went through for 16 years, this is a gift. And look, don't get me wrong, and I don't want to minimise what our poor survivors out there struggle with. It's been hell. It's the memories and the flashbacks hit me in my early 30s. I was a mother of 2 small children at that time, and that became almost the worst time of my life because I was having to manage all these flashbacks, memories, 16 years worth, and try and be a mum and try and be a good mum. It was pretty hard, but look, I'm very grateful. I'm not in a relationship at the moment, and that's okay because I know Mr. Wonderful's on his way. He's just got caught up at the moment, I would say, but that will happen, and I believe when the time is right, these things happen. But yeah.
Did I assume you got married?
Yes, I tried it twice. Twice. Third time lucky. Yeah, and look, to be fair, if you said to me what were the biggest challenges for you through the recovery, which I know is on the tip of your tongue, was that right? Was what I did to cope and survive this actually was I developed a highly evolved false self. So I became the caregiver. And what that meant was, however I felt had to be hidden. I was never allowed to show emotion. So to survive, I adapted and convinced myself that the false self was actually who I really was. So when people talk about recovery and their hardest challenge, for me, it wasn't drugs. I was too scared to actually use drugs, Mark, because I had so many barbiturates and things pumped into me to keep me pliable and less traumatized for the pedophiles. It frightened me, actually. So the biggest challenge for me was, well, who am I, really? Will the real Gloria stand up? And it just took me decades and decades to work through. Am I that? Do I feel that? Is what I think, how I feel, how I'm behaving? No, it's not. There was such a disconnect because who I was always on show. And, I had many forced abortions done at the hands of my grandmother. There were so many horrendous things. One thing, this is how powerful the conditioning is. You wanted to talk about satanic abuse. This is how powerful the conditioning was. I truly thought that if I ever had children, they would be dogs, because that's what I had drummed into me over and over again. And I'm an intelligent woman, but just the power of the mind control and the chanting and the trauma had me there. But you know what? I've emerged, and a lot of your viewers will have as well, through whatever they went through. And the way we do it is we start to recognise there's a part of us that's good, actually. We're good.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
Did you mentioned a sister?
Yes.
You had a sister. You have a sister.
Yes, yeah, a few. I've lost my whole family through this because I dared to speak out. And, you know, my siblings don't want to accept this. My version of events is my version. They will not look into it. As you can appreciate, it takes a lot of courage to come through something like this. And I think their minds have protected them, if you like. But not for me. My mind said, you're gonna speak out and you're gonna heal from this, and so I have. But the whole family are gone from my life. And to be honest, if after years and years of being called deluded or a liar or evil or, you know, deranged, or I'm sure you'll come up with a few, because survivors often get called, labelled these things. I realised actually I don't know if I need those people in my life either. And I can't lie. I had my mother say to me for decades, actually, I will love and accept the Gloria that does not keep saying this. I do not accept this happened to you. I do not believe you. If you keep doing this, I can't be in your life.
Your mother said that?
Yes.
But
so,
she was part of it, wasn't she?
Well, she removed herself a lot through my childhood. I think if you pick the book up, Mark, you'll never stop reading it. It's one of those books. But she was gone. I was really abandoned by her, and the worst time in my life was at age 11. I was made to choose. We were made to choose which parent to live with, and my father bribed me with a horse, which we have yet to see. But I believed him. I was just a kid, and I stayed there with him. And my mother took my sisters and left, and that's when I realised you didn't need to die to be in hell, and that's when the worst of it hit me. And very grateful to be alive. I didn't think I would at times.
Well, I'm glad you made it too. It is interesting about families. I mean, it's nowhere near the same thing, but I remember when I found out that my grandmother was Irish, and none of her 11 children would discuss it with me, because because when she got married to an Englishman, he got disowned for marrying her, because the Irish were so seen as dirt in the UK in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And people find this hard to believe, but they wouldn't talk to me about it. They literally all just clammed up. And I was like, well, we're only talking about the nationality of somebody. No, it's not like, not like something like this. So
No.
it is amazing how families will close ranks against people because of the potential shame and embarrassment of it socially, or because of their own shame and guilt, or some, being part of it in some way, even if they're just witnesses. Yeah. It's an incredible system how they lock us into this, how abuse victims get locked into this. I mean, when I've interviewed survivors, when I've interviewed people in the past about this, there's 2 or 3 things that get attacked on channels like this. One, if I talk about veganism, and the other one is talking about this. And it's incredible how vitriolic and nasty some people can get in the comments. And it's, it's so obviously satanic trolls or AI or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
When they say, they use things like grifter, or they're just doing it for the money, and it's like, why? Why would anybody do this for money. It's extraordinary that anybody buys into that.
And my retort is, what money? I'm not
Yeah.
getting paid to do anything. I'd love to be. I'd love to be funded to finish this next book and go across the world campaigning. It'd be great. But that, you know, I'm doing it because I believe it's the right thing to do. And, you know, if all it takes is one voice to change a child's life. And
That's actually the title of your third book, One Voice.
yeah.
So how long have you been out about this?
It's a good question. For your viewers, the average age of someone speaking out, 52. So that's how big the shame is. That's how hard it is for survivors out there. Because, Mark, when we do speak out, we're shamed and abused again.
Yeah. No,
because people want us to shut. Yeah. Why can't you get over it, Gloria? Why do you have to speak about it? Don't you just want to forget about it? Well, no, because it carries on today. And the other thing is that survivors, the worst thing you can do is tell a survivor to not think about it, to forget about it, because what people don't realise is that we get what we call triggered. And that might be a flashback. Even 3 months ago, I saw someone walking down the street, thought it was my father. I just froze. Well, he's dead, so it couldn't have been. But what I'm trying to say is we can be triggered and get a flashback just like that. So really, I think it's important we love our survivors and we just encourage them and acknowledge how brave and wow, what wonderful people they are to have survived what they have. If you said to me, what's the group you believe most in the world? Survivors, because I know what it takes for them to find the words.
Yeah, and people watching this might not realise there are hundreds of millions of survivors across the planet. That's how big this is.
So why is this not publicly and voraciously explored? You know, in New Zealand, we have great campaigns for domestic violence. You see ads on TV all the time. If you're not safe, call this number. For child sexual abuse, it's very quiet. I was meant to be interviewed on one of our two mainstream TV channels. They pushed it back. Finally, the producer rang, Gloria, we can't have you on the show. Oh, why is that? Our viewers don't really want to hear it.
Well, that's bullshit. There's kind of truth in it, but it's bullshit because the people running the media networks are all part of the same rings. Because they're the ones, that's how they're pulling all of this off. That's how they've pulled off all this evil in the world, by placing these people in positions of authority throughout local government, media organizations, through government itself, through organizations like the Masons, but also organizations like Common Purpose. If you've never heard of them, go and research them. And they've done this worldwide. How do you think they're pulling all this off? How do we think that the evil is all being exposed right now, which is actually the best thing about this time?
Yeah.
Right? Because you go back, I just go back to my own childhood, and there was a paedophile in the village, and my mum's there were lots actually, but I didn't know obviously at the time. But there was one that was obvious who'd stand outside his gate and wait for us to walk past on the way to school, and then invite us in to come and look at his bees. My mum, and the protection I had was from my mum, who said, if Bert asked you to go and see his bees, just tell him to F off. And so we did. But it was like the attitude back then. I mean, I had it everywhere. I was in a football team. I remember being in a football team, and I had to go to Norwich for a training weekend. And this manager I'd never met, because I got picked for this team. And the manager sat there in front of, 15, 14-year-old boys and said, right, lads, I'm the manager. Now, first thing I got to tell you is if you get a headache, don't come and see me unless you want to take your trousers down. And I was like this. I was just turning to my friend, go, what the fuck did he just say? So obviously I never went. I never went to see him for anything. I stayed away from him. But I remember some of the boys. It dawned on me at the time that some of them were going into his room at night, but voluntarily. And this is like, whoa.
Though I'm going to challenge you. Really, voluntarily, or did he have something
That's
over
the
them?
way it seemed to us at the time.
Yeah.
But they're very, very good at grooming.
Oh, yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
Disney has been grooming the whole world for nearly 100 years through their filth that they call entertainment.
Yeah.
The church with choir boys, etc. It's all grooming. And people don't understand what it is, because grooming is exactly the same as initiation. So you go back to the pyramidal structure, and you've got these good people joining these organizations because they think they're doing something good. Common purpose is the same. And what they do through the initiations is identify the victims or the psychopaths, and then they get accelerated up the pyramid. Yeah, this is why Tony Blair was a 33rd degree Mason at the age of 35 or whatever he was. It's they identify the psychopaths, and they pull them up, and they take them through these initiations that they can't. Then they're in a situation they can't get out of, because then they entrap them with videos and photos, and then the blackmail comes in. And this is how the structure exists, from the grassroots right the way to the top. This is what I believe God is dismantling at the moment. Hence, we're in this spiritual quarantine, this strange time.
Yeah.
But
and there's more and more people speaking out, Mark, which is fantastic.
It is, and I applaud everybody that does that. And so, in terms of going forward, you're writing a second book.
Yeah, so I'm writing a guide actually for CSA, child sexual abuse survivors, on how to get through this.
That's brilliant.
There is a way through, and every week I blog as well on the podcast. So this week's one is on dissociation, and I also have a channel called Handing the Shame Back, which is for survivors to visit. You're safe to speak. I'm very gentle, really. And so just trying to give back, Mark, because as I say, grateful to be here, and I understand what it's like to face into the shame and the void and the disbelief and the re-traumatizing that happens when survivors do speak out. And I think if we can just encourage a survivor to say speak to one person, it might be a neighbour, it might be a friend. Every time we speak of this, guess what we're doing? Handing the shame back. And that's what I want to do, help others do that.
And if any of you watching this are abusers yourself, I made a t-shirt for you.
Oh, I love it.
Because you're not going to win.
No.
They're not going to win. God wins.
No.
Look, it's been amazing to talk to you. Thank you for doing what you're doing. I'll put all the links near this video for anybody that wants to follow up with you.
Thank you.
I send you all the love I can, and all the best with the continual fight, because this is a war, and you're in the forefront, and I applaud you for your courage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That's awesome.
Okay. Thank you, Gloria.